In this video, we're going to focus on how we can start to work and put data labels on our scatter chart. As you can see, our scatter chart has a default value of X and Y coordinates, and here we have what we can call a Z coordinate or another item as well. And it will grab here these items and it will put them nicely in the center. This is very important. You might say, well, you can use data labels plugin. Well, guess what? Not possible with a scatter chart. This is a scatter chart that has been converted into a line chart, or it looks like a line chart. And here we're now going to put in our own data labels. So let's explore how we can do this. In this video, we're going to answer one of the viewers' questions, which is how to add data labels in a scatter chart in Chartjs. And this question came from one of my other videos about how to add data label only to the last data point of a line chart. And if we scroll down here, this question came from Mr. Firebeard. First of all, a special thank you to Mr. Firebeard for asking the question. And we had already some conversation here where he was trying to put it in a scatter chart, and he says he has created a scatter chart that he converted into a line and is trying to show specific values in the labels. However, it gives you the error of object, or meaning it will only show you this on the data label. And the reason why this happens is because the data labels plugin doesn't work. So eventually I replied back and I double checked this as well. It doesn't work, and it will give you a default response of this if it's a scatter chart. Even if you converted that scatter chart into scatter with line, doesn't work. So eventually we had a final conversation here. And I asked, what is really the issue and what are you trying to do here? Well, eventually this is the answer. I have a scatter chart but connected data points with lines, and these lines I try to show values that are not the X or Y value, but so to say a Z value, alright, or a Z value. As an example, if a machine is running on 30% power, it will get this line. When it's running about on 50% power, it will get another line. So what I want to do here basically, so I assume there are basically two lines here, and the only thing what will happen is we will get the value of the Z, which would be another object value, and that object value should be displayed in the scatter chart as a data label. Alright, so I hope this was a bit, that was clear the question, but we're going to work on it right now. Because in essence, you cannot create a scatter chart with data labels, but we can create our own version. So what we're going to do is really dive deep into the Canvas API and make our own plugin, so to say. What we need here is then chartjs3.com getting started. We need to get the default code. For some reason, I get this on Google Chrome. Why, I don't know. Anyway, if I scroll down here, we have this here. We copy this chunk of code. And by the way, if you are on Firefox, you will see that it will work fine, and on my other computer works fine. But somehow Google Chrome gives this error here. I copy this. And if you want to understand what this code does, please watch this video that explains the JavaScript of that. I'm going to paste this in here. Once I paste that in here, I'm just going to cut out this. I'm going to paste that one in there. At least that's for me, obviously. Save this and refresh. There we are. So now we have this here. But of course, what do we want? We want a scatter chart. So I'm going to do some modifications to make it a scatter chart. First of all, to create a scatter chart here, we say here, scatter. If I save this now and refresh, we get the grid lines that is correct, but we have one issue. And the issue is very simple. The data is not in the same structure. Remember, in a scatter chart, we have a different data structure. So what I'm going to do here is, we're going to make the data structure and very similar to what was the request of Mr. Firebeard, which was an X, Y, and Z. Well, and Z will probably it can be any value, so I will just give that a value of status or something like that. So what we're going to do here, data, and we're going to put in your brackets because it is still an array. And then we put in your curly braces. And in here, we need to put in the X value. And in this case, let's put in an X value, and we're going to copy this. Say your X, I'll just put this. And, or maybe what I would say is X will be 3, and then Y equals 18. So then we have this one, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this, except then this will be based on certain values here. Oh, before we do that, I want the status here. Let's say your status, okay, or what was it? Was related to power, 50% power, 50% power. And this could be maybe power status. It could be anything. You can make up your own word. Later on, it will be important that you will match whatever you put in here. It will be matched later on. So I'm going to put this in here. Alright, so we have this here. So once we have this, what we need to do is the following here. So if I look also at this video, I was not certain, because this one was how to add a data label only at the last data point of a line. So I am not certain if you want it only on the last one or if you want it on each. So if you want it on each, you can do it like this. If you want on the last one, well, we can remove this, or we can later on just show the last value here. But that's alright. So if that would be a request, just put it in the comment section so I understand your question even more clearly. So what we're going to do here, just some default codes, 3, and let's put in 5, 7, 10, and then 11. Alright. Then this, I will give this, let's give this here the red line. And the reason why we're going to copy this, because I want to have two data sets here. I'm going to copy this one, and then put a comma here, because that's the second data set. But this red line will now be a blue line, and here we're going to change the values. Oh, I realize here we have everything 18. Yeah, I guess we can just put this, let's make this 17, 16, 15, and then we have 14 and 13. So that's it. Here, remove the color. This will be the red line. The upper value is the red line. Remove the brackets here. There we are. I can just copy this and replace this here all, and then just make this alpha value of 1, so it's a solid color. This will be a line, so I'm going to remove the border with here. We don't need this. For the blue line, same story, except here I want the blue color, which is the second value there. I'm going to paste this in here. There we are. I'm going to paste that one here as well. But here, number 1. Then remove this. So if I save this now, let's see what will happen with our item. So we have here this, and then we have an unidentified syntax error, 65. Probably I forgot a comma somewhere. 65, there you are. Make sure you have the comma, same story here. Put a comma there, or else it will not work. Refresh, there we are. So we have this here, and I want to just give this some different numbers because we are exactly identical here. That should not be. So what I'm going to say here, this is 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then there we are, and then this here, same story. This will be 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So if I save this, this will be 30% power. Save, refresh. So now we have this. We have here, what I want to do maybe is this one, just have this incremental. This one's from 18, 17, 16. Alright, that's already fine. That's the Y value here. Although these lines are slightly unexpected here, but that's fair. Oh, because of this here. That explains it. The lines are not, because these are now, or the dots are in this order here. And eventually what I want to do here now is to draw a line. So I do recommend, because if you're using a scatter, there must be probably a reason you're using a scatter. Because with a scatter chart, you can draw lines halfway through or midway. Well, with a line chart, it always starts at the beginning. So I assume here, in your case, you have a reason why you're using the scatter chart. So, what is this? I assume that is all correct. I want to question that part. So I will say here, show line, because the difference between a scatter chart and a line chart is basically not showing the lines. And of course, a slightly different setup in the data because we have X and Y coordinates. So we say here, show line will be true. And then we do another one here below. Show line with capital L set on Boolean value of true. Save this, refresh, and now you can see here we get these values and in this order. Maybe this is probably slightly better. I want to change that. I'm going to make this 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So it's slightly easier to read. And I was expecting it to be different, but fair enough. One goes up or and slightly different structure, but doesn't matter so much. So what I want to do here is the following. I want to put in here values on here. And you might see here, because you can see here the scatter, you might say, well, scatter still starts at the beginning. Well, in this case, because we have no start at 0. So let's put the start at 0 at the X scale, so you have an understanding of that one. Put a comma, or begin at 0, set on true. Save this, refresh, There we are. So now we have like this. Beautiful. So what I want to do is basically here the next. We're going to work with a plugin because we have to make our own plugin now. So we're going to say here in the options, I'm going to say comma, and then we're going to say here plugins. And this plugins will be a name. So we can just give it any name. In this case, I'll just give it a very simple name of scatter data labels. Data labels. So it's our own version. So if I save this now, of course, nothing happens yet, or it doesn't even read. Why not? Because this here is missing our constant. So we're going to make here constant scatter data labels equal curly braces, and then in here ID with these scatter labels. So once we did this, very important here, this is a string value, comma, then we can start working on this. This, and this, keep them consistent and similar. Same writing, everything, including the capitalized letters. Very important. So now what we're going to do here, we're going to start to draw our items here. Right now you don't see anything, that's fair enough. Don't worry about that. What we're going to say here is the following. We're going to put in here a function, and basically this function will say here, after data sets, draw, and then in here, we're going to say here, chart, comma, args, for arguments and options. And we'll be using chart here in this case. Basically here, this after data set draw defines the timing of drawing it. So let me just comment this out for a minute so you will understand it better. Save that, refresh here. So as you can see here, we have different items that are being drawn. There is a line, these are the data sets that are being drawn. And then we have, for example, the grid lines. So how's Chartjs working? It first draws the grid lines and the scales, and then it starts to draw here the data set and probably as well the labels, sorry. The labels, and afterwards it will draw the tooltip. And why is this important? Because you can see here, the order of drawing is essential because based on layering. If, for example, the legend will be drawn before or after the tooltip, what will happen is that this legend will be on top of the tooltip, making it harder to read. So in this case, you see, when we hover over an item, the tooltip is above everything because it's being the last element being drawn or that has the highest priority. So this one must be drawn at the very last moment and always be on top of everything. Makes sense. So with draw data set here, this one, we say we want to add the labels, the data labels, after we draw the data set, which makes sense. Or else, if we would do it before the data sets and the text would be somewhere here matching, the line will overlap that and you will have a hard time to see it. Very important here. This year, I probably have to make a separate video for that. However, for now, you probably get the essentials. So now we have that. Then what we have to do here, we have to create a constant, and this constant we need to do object destructuring. Here we say CTX, and that's basically the canvas itself. So then what we're going to say here equals chart. Once we did that, we need to save this value. The CTX.save will save all the adjustments here, all these items, so we can work with that specific item. So basically it's keeping it in memory for us now, so we can work on it and start to pinpoint. Because basically what we need to pinpoint here is we need to figure out the coordinates of this, and then figure out how we can put the text here above. Then we have to figure out how we can put text here in a canvas, and of course how we can get this specific text compared to anything else. And maybe I will just reduce here the text here of power, and the reason why is that this is a quite long text and that will probably not always be very desirable, but of course you can do it. I'm just going to remove that, and then here remove all of this extra space. Alright, save that, refresh, fair enough. And status could be maybe power, doesn't matter. So what we're going to do now is the following. First of all, what I want to do here is to start working on creating a font. So we say here ctx.font equals. This is basically the font settings. We can say here 12 pixels because we need to specify now the CSS properties basically. How will the font look like? But it's not really CSS here because we're going to work here in the canvas itself. So, but it's just very similar settings as the CSS. CSS. All right, very important. So basically here we want to say here the font. If we have the text, and I'm going to grab the same text as what we have here. This is sans serif, and it has here 12 pixels, and that will be more than enough. We could make it black or the color if you want to have the color here as well, but I'll leave that for now. Then what we need to do here is the following. What we really want to do here, and this is very important, how can we get, for example, our data here, because we want to have this specific text here. So how do we get this? Well, if you remember, we have this one here. Let's see here. We have this chart property here. Let's do a console log. Then we say here chart. If we save this, refresh. So now, let's see, does it show anything? Oh, no, it doesn't show here anything. CTF save, console log chart. What is going on? Why is it not responding? Let's see what we need to do here. Most likely I need to put in here a very specific item. Alright, I just paused the video, check why was it not working. I figured out already why. Maybe you noticed that when I scroll down here, I deactivated the plugin registration here. So I have to activate that and then have a refresh. Now you can see it works. So make sure, if you didn't activate it yet, or if you commented out just like when I tried to demonstrate it, make sure you have it again activated, like that, or registered. So now it works again, of course, so let's continue on. So you can see here, we get these values here, and if I go on, well, even if I hover, or it doesn't matter, you see here right now all these animations here that's happening, and then eventually, once it's fully loaded, you go in here, and then in the chart here, we have nice information that we can start to use. And all we need to do is here is go into the configurations or the configs, and here we can start to look. Let's see, if you go in here, then we should see somewhere here the data, if I'm not mistaken. Configuration, config, see this legend. Let's see, where are you? Data, or was it the chart, the canvas? No. Should be in here. We have this one here, so it's config data. Let's see, how do we get here exactly? I know it was not through this, so hold on, I'll just quickly check. Alright, I found it. I guess it was it was not really clear visual. If you click here on config, you'll see this and you get this one here. However, I had my notes, so if I scroll down here, you'll find here data as well. If you click on this, you will see there's an object, and then goes here down, it has everything here. So that's the one we need, which makes sense, because if you remember how this really works, Chartjs, you go here from my chart, or basically it's a chart in itself, and then you go from config we go to data. So it's exactly the same what we're doing here. So we say dot config dot data, save that. If I save this now and refresh, let's look now what we get. We get the data sets, and then in the data sets we can say 0 or 1, because we have two data sets. We have a blue line and a red line, and then we also have here the labels. But if you want to go here, and then within here we can go into the data specific. Then if you open up this, we can get the status, we can get the X or the Y value. So we say your data dot data sets, and then data set 0 in this case, and then we say here the data, and here we can get specific data. Let's get the one which would be data 0, where you get a status of 50, and then we're going to get, oh, that's the, yeah, basically data 0 status 50. Here this is an array, remember that's why you have a 0 or number, and here we say status. If I save this, refresh, there you are. So you can see here, basically because of the animation, it loads 50 or 35 times. So we saw all of the animations being done. Alright, so now we have this. What I want to do now is start to position, because this is the text we want to grab. Position the text in here. So how will we do this? Well, we already had this here, we already specified the item here. The only thing what we need to now do is basically create the text. So what I'm going to say here is the following. Let me double check my notes. We're going to say, alright, we have this here, and then we say here the following. We say here, we can say here, what I need here is the text width. So I'm going to say a constant text width. And the text width here equals the following. Let me see. Oh, sorry. No, this is not the text width. I realize it is not. This is the text. We need to fill up the text first. So we say here, I'm going to remove this. Sorry. CTX. And then we say here, fill text. First, let's grab the text, and afterwards we're going to measure the text. I'm going to explain later on why we need to measure the text. So I was just realizing, why is it that way? Alright. So what we're going to do here is, what we have this here, I'm going to copy and put it in there. So once we do this, we will have now basically the text position, or at least the text, and then we can say here X and Y. Let's say 100 pixels, and here 100 pixels. If I save this now, refresh, you can see what is happening now. So we're now drawing basically the position of the text, and where it is based on this. You can see this is the canvas, and you see 100 by 100. So it says here 100 from left to right, which is the first value here, from left to right, because 0 pixels is in the corner here. We can do this one on 0, and then you will understand that as well. And then it's all here, or sorry, not in the corner, but it goes to the left side. Start on the left side. Let's remove that. That's on the left side. And then 100 down, because this is the Y coordinate. So this is X and Y coordinates. So 0, 0 equals top corner. Or, yeah, as you can see, your top corner, but of course you have to go a little bit more down. Maybe we're putting it 10 pixels. Starts to be visible. So what we need to do here now is not to get this, but we need to figure out how do we get the X and Y coordinates of this specific item here and of that item, and etc, etc. So what we're going to do here is the following. We're going to figure out how do we get those items. So let's say here this will be eventually the X and Y coordinates. To do this, all we need is the following. We're going to say here, this is another item that we're going to put in, which is console log. Alright. Then I'm going to comment it out. For now, we don't need this one. There's a lot of items or a lot of code we have, and that can get confusing. So here is the coordinates for exactly the specific item here. This is the red line is, let's see, the red line is index 0. So this is very important. So we go in here. We say chart dot. Then all what we want to do here is chart, and then say get data set meta parentheses 0, which would be basically indicating the index, a data set index, which is the first one. And then we say here data 0, meaning index 0, or sorry, not index 0, data set 0, which is basically this data set, and then 0 would be here index 0 as well, the first one. So we want to get the coordinates of that. And then we say here dot x to get the x coordinate. So if I save this now and refresh, let's see, it's not a function. Alright, fair enough. So let's see what I'm missing. I might miss something. Get data set meta 0 parentheses here. This is the issue here, sorry. This is an array value. So this needs to be in a bracket. Refresh. Now you can see 271 plus, let's say 272 would be the y of the x coordinate. So let's see here, 272. If I save this, refresh, you can see here now we get very close to it. Or we get basically close to it. The reason why it is right now just to the side here, that is related to the width of the text. I'm going to fix that later on, but we have already our first item here. So once you understand this, you probably can figure out that for the y value, we do the same except for the y. So if I do this now, put it in here, they say y, save that, refresh. Look now where we are pinpointing. We're pinpointing exactly on the item itself. So then, if you want to push it up a little bit, and later on we're going to solve this blockage here, we want to push this a bit up. Well, let's do this one first. I'm just going to put on 1 here. And we just change this to 1, and we change this one to 1, so you can see it more clear. Alright, 1 is there apparently. I was not expecting that, but fair enough, that is fine. What I want to do is I want to push this value here, which is number 30, that's being clipped off a little bit, so we have to solve that later on. Push it up. So how do we push it up? First of all, let's say here 10. Minus 10 here means we're going up 10. Why? Because the canvas counts 0 at the corner here, and going down is increasing in pixels for the y coordinates. For the left to right, or the horizontal coordinates, it will count 0 here as well in the corner, and going here would be increasing in pixels. So if I refresh now, or let's say save this and refresh, we get this here, and I notice it didn't move at all. So the y coordinates minus 10. Oh, of course, it's not here. This is the console log. Let's remove that one. Minus 10 here. Refresh. There we are. Alright, so now we have this here. Next one I want to do is I want to push it here, but what I want to do is I don't want to push it with a fixed amount of pixels. I want to push it based on the length of the text. Remember, imagine we would have here, this would be maybe power. We have a long text, but this text here is not being shown right now. So what we need to do here is to solve this. So how do we do this? Well, I showed you a glimpse previously, but now let's start to work on that. And this is basically what we call the width. So we say here, let's say here well, we can do console log. So we're going to work now on the text width, and the text width is basically this. So we have here the text width. Well, you can do here just ctx or maybe console log just to get this, and I guess this here can be removed. We don't need this. And then what we want to say here is the following: ctx, and then what we want to do here is to measure. What I want to do is I want to measure the amount of pixels in width of this text, because that is an issue here, because we need to push it to the center, because right now it's on the center. It will start exactly, well, it starts at the center, or at least this is a starting point, and then it goes to the left. So what we need to do here is basically the text width, or measure the text width here. So what we're going to do here is the following. We're going to say text width, ctx. Let's look for that measure. This is the right term. Measure text. And then to measure the text, what are we going to measure? Well, to be exact, the item that we want to write. So what is the text we want to write? It's this one here. Remember this. The field text was this specific text. So if I do this and save that, refresh, we can see here now the text width. Let's see what we get. We get a whole bunch of stories. And all I want to know is basically the pixel. So let's see here, how many pixels is this? The width is 60 pixels here. So what I need to do here then is this text width. So what I'm going to do here now is I'm going to, well, we can just add it up here above. We say here, constant text width equals ctx measure this. Alright. Put that there. So once we have this, we'll make sure you have this semicolon. And then going to grab this one. And what I want to do here is to find the x coordinate. So basically here the x coordinate was the issue here. So what I want to do here, I want to do not only minus this, but I want to divide it by 2. So we'll divide this by 2. And there we are. So if I save this now and refresh, did I divide this by 2? Alright, where is it? For some reason it's not showing. Minus that, text width divide by 2. Let's see here, I'm not seeing it at all. So let's see if I just do text width minus. Why are we not seeing this? Am I missing something? Let me just quickly check. Alright, so I figured out here, sorry, tiny mistake, this is really tough. I've forgotten one item. So we have here the text width, but we need to say here then dot width, because what happens is here, we're seeing of course all of these metrics here, and I don't want all the metrics, I only want the width metrics here, so we're just going to grab that one. So the moment you put in here dot width, you save that, refresh, you can see now it works, and now we need to divide this by 2. So we say here, divide this by 2. Save that. Refresh. There we are. So do we have here some items to solve? Absolutely. I'll do that. We will work on that later on. We need to have some padding here. So now we have this one here. So now it looks like we're basically done. Of course, I can imagine you say, hold on. We want it on every specific item here. So what we need to do now is to figure out how can we do it for this one, how can we do it for that one, for all of these items. So what we need to do here is basically loop through it. So what do we need to loop through here? Well, we're going to put it here between. And the only thing here, this will maintain the same because this is the font size and the font family style. That will not differ. The only thing what will change is the numbers here and here, because we have a lot of numbers here and we have 2 data sets. And in the data set, we need to loop through all of these data points. So how can we do this? Well, for this, I know there's probably a better way to do it, but I will work with just a for loop for now. Say let. And here I'm going to do 2 for loops. The first for loop will work on the data set itself, indicating which data set we're going to work on. So we say here, I'll just make say let equals, or let x equals 0. And then in here, we will say x, we loop through this, and then we say here, how can we measure basically the length of our data set here? We have this here. All we have to do, because this is an array, we just copy this part. We say this dot length. So once we did this, we have that one here, and then we can say here x plus plus. Basically in here, and if I say here console log, and say yes, you will see it will work nicely here. Of course, it will loop many times, but you will see it will always have 2 values. This is correct because we have a length of 2 here, because we have 2 datasets 1 and dataset 2, or basically 2 datasets, the red line and the blue line here. So what we're going to do now is the following. This here needs to originally be placed in here, but we need to create here another for loop. Why? First we loop through the dataset, and then we loop through the data points in that specific data set. So that's what we're going to do next. So we say here for loop, another one. For, and then we say here let I, iteration, basically loop is an iteration, and iteration means repeating yourself x number of times. How many times? Well, depending on the loop or the length in this case. Then we say here x, or sorry, I, not x. Loop through this as long as, then we have here all of this, we're going to get this, but now we get more specifically. The data set, we will loop through this if the data set equals what value here. You say here the number, no, we're going to grab now x, because x is the number here, because we replace the data set number with this. And then we say here the following, dot data dot length, because we're going to get the length of the data here. You might say, well, what about the status length? Doesn't matter, because we assume that this here is always consistent. I expect here that the status should have also a value in here. But you could go more deeper by going here, data, and then status, if ever. So we have the length here, and then we say here I++ to increment this. Alright, so now we have this here, and all what we need to do here is basically copy this part, or specifically, not even the console log, let's comment this out. And then what we're going to do is the following. It's going to focus on this part here. I'm going to cut this out, put it here. And then here, you can see this is a loop here, must be let. Yes, we are not allowed to use constant multiple times, that's why we're using let here. So we change that one, and then we say the following. Data set is always x, here as well x. The get data set meta is also related to the data set, so it's the x value. This one maintains, and this one here we have as well. So now we have that. What about the I here? I is related to the data point itself, so the data in here. So we say here I. Here we again paste the I, and another I here. Once we did this, we can now do one more item here, or well, we can just save this and just look if we get the response. So now we get this response here. This looks beautiful. What we need to do is one more thing here. I want to reset everything so we don't keep any of this data for any other parts of the chart. So we say here ctx dot or restore. It's reset or basically undo all the data that we saved here. We saved this data, but we want to undo this because we're still drawing, because this sheet draws only the data set after the data set. But there might be more drawing going on here, and I don't want to damage or influence that as well. So now we have this done. Oh, sorry. We have to solve some final items here. Save this, refresh. There we are. So what I want to do now is, you can see here this. That is not nice. Add blocks our view. So what we're going to do here, in the Y item, comma, we're going to say here grace. What does really mean grace? It means having a bit of a space between the top or the last value, and then there will be an extra space here with the grid line. So it will never hit anymore this. And this is very useful for our situation now. So we say grace, let's say 5% is very decent. Make sure this is a string value. Put a comma here, just to be sure. Save this, refresh. So now you can see we have a grace here. We have always extra space. It will never hit anymore our legend. Then our item that we need to fix is this here. This is probably an undesirable item here, or what happened. That's why I'm telling you to really consider the amount of space you want to use or the length of the text. So we go in the options as well. We're going to say here, basically what I want to do, I want to put a padding. But the padding will not work directly on the canvas here, because what will happen is the canvas itself will just maintain, and it will just have the same effect here. And what I mean by that is this. Let me show you. So you might say, well, if I just go in here in this canvas, then we say here, I'm going to put an in style line, style attribute, and then we say here padding. And then we say here 20 pixels, for example. Save that. Refresh. What is happening? While the canvas has a padding, it still cuts or clips off our text. I don't want this, so that's why this option is not what we need. We need to do padding or layout adjustment within the canvas, so it will create what I could call a artificial padding effect. So we go here, we say here layout, and in the layout we can say padding, and here we could do padding on everywhere, or maybe you want only padding on this side here, meaning padding on the right side. So you say padding right 20 pixels, like this, save that, refresh, and now you can see here we have this, but of course this text is probably far too long. So maybe we can say here, another one is 40 pixels. Let's see what happened. That is slightly better, but should you do this, I would highly not recommend you to have long text here. You could do here also shorthand is just say padding everywhere. Then top, bottom, left, and right gets it. But in our case, left padding, or sorry, right padding makes more sense. So we say padding, right, maybe 20 pixels. Put a comma here, of course, save that. And then I'll just reduce this text here. Save, refresh, and there we are. We have a little bit of padding, so we want to cut away our text. Beautiful. So basically, this is the way how you can create a scatter chart with data labels. Maybe if you enjoy, you say, well, this is interesting, but what about if I want to put in an image, or maybe want an icon here, or etc, etc. Well, guess what? It is possible, because the building what we did here is very similar to what we have done here, except here, in this specific video, which I highly recommend, and the build is almost similar, except here we work with images. And if you understand how to do now the scatter label text, understanding how to do the images will be very, very easy for you, because it's very similar. Highly recommend to watch this one as well.